So when most VCs pick a lane, whether they invest in, very new startups, pre-seed, seed stage, then you have others who pick, more mature startups, A series, B series, etc. You decided to go early stage. What was the driving decision behind that?
Yeah, well, I'm actually reconsidering that decision, but I started in early stage because I'm a former founder, serial entrepreneur, and I fashion myself as one of those 0 to 1 founders, right? Like I'm really good at starting stuff. I've never been able to get over that hump to really scale something massively, but really good at starting stuff. So I figured I might as well help founders in the place where I'm good at, right? And I'm also just interested in bringing ideas into fruition versus helping more established companies. Like it's just not my personality type to deal with larger organizations. So less than 10 employees, I'm your guy. But more than that, I probably am not even interested in helping because if you made it to that point, you probably made it beyond my ability to help. But also just looking at it from a pure returns perspective, the power law is most powerful at the earliest stages, right? So that's when you can get those 100x, 1000x returns when you're investing at very low valuations in the early stages. So I can invest in 100 companies and lose 99 times, and that one winner could take care of the losses from all the rest. So just so two, you know, basically two reasons. I personally enjoy early stage more, and I think from a returns perspective, there's more upside potential there.
Yeah, and at least by my last count, you have 80 plus investments, and with that, what patterns have you noticed are more prevalent in startups that are successful versus struggling?
Yeah, man. That number's actually doubled probably since whenever you saw that number. So I'm around 160 at this point, and what I didn't appreciate when I first got started was the importance of the quality of the founders. I thought you just invest in a good idea and a good market, and that the rest will take care of itself. It's not like that at all,
Hmm.
especially at the early stages. The success of the companies are limited by the quality of the founders, specifically the CEO. So CEOs who are, intelligence is like basic. Everybody, you got to have that baseline intelligence, but that's not enough. You need somebody with high EQ that can deal with people, that can communicate effectively, somebody who is resilient because, especially the early days, shoot, probably even all the way up to IPO, being a startup founder is extremely difficult. And if you haven't faced challenges in your life, you're probably going to give up. So
Yeah, yeah.
I've had quite a few good businesses, right? Like business make perfect sense, good tech, good market, favorable market dynamics, and they lose because they quit. They quit too soon, and maybe had they stuck it out another 3 months, the market would have corrected, and they could have made it out of whatever rut they were in. But it's really the founder quality that separates the winners from the losers, and those three, I think, traits are most important. So being able to effectively communicate, being resilient, and being able to face those challenges, and then being highly adaptable. Right, so like new information is coming in all the time, data is changing all the time, and you need to be able to have a systematic process with which you can take in massive amounts of data and make decisions, right? Not be paralyzed by all the data, but actually make decisions. And when you have hypotheses that are proven wrong in the market, you can quickly pivot and adapt to the new circumstances.
Yeah.
So I think founder quality is number one.
There's an article you had written about investment strategy where you said, my goal with this series of articles is to get black investors to
Hmm.
think at a systemic level, sort of like how you would approach managing a sovereign wealth fund, for which generating
Right.
financial returns are only one consideration. So talk to me about what other considerations are important when investing, and how does that systemic approach translate to the work that you do?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't affect my well, my former day job. My last day at Techstars was actually a couple weeks ago, so I'm no longer the managing director of Techstars Tulsa. But um, and part of the reason is that platforms is not operating at a systemic enough level, right? It's not, it wasn't big enough. But really, what I noticed in most investing, but especially in private markets and venture capital, is the job of investors at a high level. So like when you're operating at a system level, when you actually have, organized capital markets, and your group is in has actual power. So if like a group of black investors had the same power as, for example, the PayPal mafia, we would operate differently. And what I notice is that they don't necessarily pick winners. Like they obviously they pick high quality founders, good businesses, but they're not in the business of picking winners. They're in the business of making winners. So as soon
Mm.
as one of the top tier VCs writes a check into your startup, that's a signal to the rest of the market that now you're verified.
You're selected.
You got you're selected, right?
Yeah.
And then a bunch of other doors start opening up. And we still operate under the false assumption that meritocracy is an actual thing. Meritocracy is a fairy tale. Nobody gets ahead because only of the quality of their work or their intelligence or their effort. You have This game is more than most is a relationship game, and doors are open because of who you know. I know plenty of smart founders who are assholes that nobody wants to work with, and they get nowhere because they don't have the relationships. So when you're operating, in a ecosystem with a more collective strategy. Now, I'm not saying that I don't know if the quote unquote mainstream investors are deliberately doing this because the system just, but we have to actually be intentional about creating, um, for lack of a better term, investment mafias, right? Like where we pick winners and we make them win using the power of our relationships, connections, government relations, lobbying efforts. Um, I remember I read an article a few years ago about how the Fortune 100 gets like 200x return on their lobbying dollars. So
Mm.
every dollar they spend on lobbying, they get $200 back in revenue or income. And that's when I realized we're playing the wrong game. If you can consistently generate those type of returns based off lobbying, then we need to be doing more of those activities. And lobbying is only, taking advantage of building and taking advantage of relationships.
So if the game is not about hating the players but the game, so if there's a game that has to be played, how do black founders play it well so that we can hate the game and say it should be a meritocracy, it should not be just based on who I know, but because it is,
Mhm.
how do we win that game?
Yeah. Um, One of the benefits of going through accelerators is getting access to those networks, especially the top tier accelerators. So, like, one of the selling points of Techstars was, access to the Techstars network, and there's like 20,000 founders, mentors, investors in that network. Joining professional associations, so like. On the black side, it'd be like NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers, National Black MBA Association, getting yourself into rooms where you can create relationships. And also, as a startup founder, I've seen a lot of success from founders who use thought leadership as marketing strategy, because you're not only marketing to potential customers, you're marketing to potential investors and potential employees as well. So um, the one to many approach versus like, going to conferences is like one to one. Like you got to meet individuals, but establishing yourself as a thought leader on social media is a one to many approach where you can get in front of thousands or potentially millions of people at once, and building your personal brand. Now, for a lot of startup founders, I know that's daunting because most of us are introverts and we don't want to do it. Like, I don't actually want to be doing this podcast, but like I need to do it, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
like talking to people. I don't like being I guess I guess I'm like a G list influencer. Like I've got a decent following. It's not, I'm not on celebrity status, but but I do it because it's a means to an end, and I have these ideas that I need to get out, and people seem to resonate with. And I've seen, some of the top founders in my portfolio are really good at that, or they create systems to build the brand and community around the company. So, like creating a community versus a person now being dependent on your personal brand. And I've seen both of those things work. So, if you have like a very ardent and loyal community, that can also help a lot. But um, you know, getting connected to as many people as possible increases your chances of success because it's likely that somebody who you're connected to is going to be able to help you when you need it, right? So if I know a million people and I can ask a million people a favor, that's better than asking one, right? Because most likely somebody in that following is gonna be able to
Yeah.
help me.
Yeah. I know you're somebody who cares a lot about community development also. And so when you're thinking about an investment, um, how do you evaluate whether an investment specifically serves an opportunistic return opportunity or a
Mhm.
strategic community opportunity? Like, how do you determine
Right.
whether it serves either or? It doesn't matter.
Yeah. It does matter, and obviously the ideal is both. Like if I can get one that does both, then I'll prioritize that kind of deal. But um, there are phases in terms of like the economic development plan that I've laid out, and right now I'm in a capital accumulation phase. So right now I'm prioritizing anything that makes me the most money personally, and also the people around me. Because one of my other personal goals is helping to create at least 1,000 other Black millionaires. Right. So I don't really care where the money comes from, as long as legal and people
Yeah.
aren't hurt in the process. So I'm not probably not going to get into the weapons of mass destruction game, or certain areas of defense. But um, you know, so it kind of depends on what phase you're in. The next phase is more focused on strategic things. So, for example, in my book, I talk about the key areas of development. So, food, energy, water, defense, shelter. So, like picking one of those verticals and then taking it over. I've also got a soft spot for consumer goods. So like, we've got probably 100 different black-owned soap companies. We probably don't need 100. We need two or three really big ones, right? So like, there's a consolidation play that can be run there, and I don't know how much money is in the soap game, but it's more about that. Those strategic investments are more about job creation because also one aspect of political power is the number of jobs that you can control, right? So that's why Home Depot and Delta Airlines have so much power in the city of Atlanta because they control thousands of jobs in that city, right? So it's not only about financial returns for your shareholders; it's also about the income you're generating for your employees and third order effects of the community around it. So if all of a sudden now I have you know 1,000 extra above average paying jobs in a community, those people now are going out spending more money at restaurants and
Hmm.
childcare services and healthcare, and the knock on effects in the rest of the economy expand out from there. So I think mainly about one, wealth building and financial returns, but also job creation and the quality of those jobs too. So 1,000 high paying jobs are better than 1,000 minimum wage jobs, and think about labor force participation rates, GDP contribution. So like all black owned businesses contribute less than 1% of total GDP, which means we're
Hmm.
economically irrelevant, and which is why people can harm us politically, socially, economically with impunity because we've built no productive capacity, no base of productive capacity with which to build a more stable power structure. So I think about all those things when investing, but when I'm looking at individual deals, that usually doesn't factor in. It's like, does this fit into a broader picture, and does it offer potential expansion plays later on, right? So like, I might make three investments in three competitors and try to roll them up.
Yeah,
And most
yeah.
VCs don't won't do that. Won't invest in direct competitors.
You're passionate about Tulsa, and I think about how do smaller cities compete, or maybe not even compete, but learn from bigger cities, major tech hubs, without the same amount of resources that those major tech hubs can accumulate and throw at an issue.
Yeah, I mean that's a hard question. If I had all the answers, I'd probably be uh, in charge of more capital right now. But what I have learned from Tulsa is the power of community and of creating enough serendipitous and organic opportunities to connect for people to connect, right? So like you don't always have to have a meeting for a specific purpose. One thing that we're really good at here is just having a bunch of random social activities targeting, founders and business owners, and you end up making a lot of useful connections just in the random interactions that happen. But that's on the economic connectivity side. In order to move the needle forward, you have to be a little bit more intentional. And I think smaller cities can compete on some fundamental things like quality of life, like especially targeting certain demographics like people who are a little bit further along in their careers and have started families. Like I most of my adulthood was spent in Atlanta, and my 20s in Atlanta is completely different than my lifestyle now, and Tulsa suits my lifestyle more than Atlanta does at the moment. We might end up back in Atlanta, but even the house that I still keep in Atlanta is way in the suburbs. So like it's different. It's much different than when I was living in Atlantic Station.
Yeah, yeah.
But creating place is very important. Like creating places where people actually want to live and work is like probably 50% of that, right? Because like you're gonna have issues with retention if you try to stick people in places that are not cool to live and don't have basic services like grocery store, childcare. You're not going to build a thriving startup hub in a food desert, right? So there's some like basic making things, and then some other things like making it easy to connect to customers and capital. So like New York is the Wild West. You go out there, you just got to grind it out and hope you make the right connections to make it work. Whereas smaller cities have the benefit of there are probably entities that can get to everybody that matters, right? Like in Tulsa, I can get to the mayor if I need to. I don't, I've never needed to do that, but like I'm one phone call away from meeting the mayor of Tulsa. I'm probably several years and many phone calls and meetings and donations away from meeting the mayor of New York. So being able to use your smallness as a benefit to connect entrepreneurs to sources of capital and most importantly customers. So like chambers of commerce in small cities can be very important for helping, like for example a small startup, a software startup who's targeting small construction businesses to reach those customers, whereas it's a little bit harder to make those connections. Even though there's more of them exist in an ecosystem, it's hard to actually get to the players that matter in larger cities. So smaller cities can use their smallness as an advantage to connect founders more efficiently to resources in that community. And then also getting more community support around them, right? Because it's kind of like an underdog mentality, and that people can rally around these hometown heroes. Versus if you're another rich person in New York, nobody gives a fuck.
No, I think about so I have a private social club here. We have a whole
Mm.
angle for creating community for founders, and subset of that is Black founders, obviously. And so
Yeah,
I shouldn't say obviously, but that's part of it. And so I think
yeah,
a lot about physical space and how physical space brings people together. And so because you touched on, the using the smallness and leveraging the smallness and creating events and opportunities for these founders to get to know each other, speak more about what role physical space plays in building successful startup communities.
yeah. So one, developing physical spaces is also a valuable economic activity, and there are returns to be made there, right? So like being, building the store creates jobs, owning the store also creates jobs. So there's a whole economic development play just in developing the land, right? Because the basis of all wealth starts in land. Even data centers have to be physically located somewhere, right? Um, so one, there's economic activity there, and then two, one thing that has been beneficial and interesting about the Tulsa ecosystem is that literally all the startup activity happens within, call it a 10 square block radius. So like I can physically walk to everything that happens, right?
Mm.
Whether it's a meeting with a VC, city hall is also walking distance. If there's a happy hour targeting founders or a demo day, pitch night, usually it's within walking distance, right? And that um, it doesn't seem like it would be that important, but if you think about it, it actually increases the amount of activity that you can do in a specific period of time. So if we've got people coming in from outside and like they're touring the ecosystem, they can literally get more meetings in or more events in and more activity in the same amount of time because they're spending less time in transit. And it seems trivial, but having lived in Atlanta and dealt with Atlanta traffic, I can tell you it is not the amount of time you spend in transit is
Yeah.
not trivial. And it increases the amount of activity that can happen for an individual, but also for a community. So if like, hey, there's a demo day over here and a happy hour over here, I can probably make it to both, right?
Hmm.
Whereas if one is across town, then that's impossible. So um, creating physical spaces that are in close proximity and are walkable to not only the business activity, so the founder happy hour, but also if you want to take a lunch meeting or if there's childcare, so you're never too far from picking up or dropping off your child, like little things like that increase the amount of social activity and social connectedness that can happen in a community, and physical spaces are a big part of that because these also need to be housed in places that people actually want to go, like
Yeah.
a cool speakeasy versus just a random, chain restaurant or bar, right? Or like the mom and pop uh, food truck. Food truck Fridays in the local park is more interesting than just going meeting at a random Starbucks, right?
Yeah.
So um, these placemaking things are very important, and the physical spaces and the people who create community around those spaces are very important, along with creatives, because like nobody wants to be in a city without any culture or art or music or culinary arts, right? So like those enabling factors make a place desirable to live in, and then it's easier to it's slightly easier to deal with those hard days when like you lost your biggest customer or you get kicked in the teeth by an investor that told you your idea is terrible and you should quit,
Mm-hmm.
right? So being in a cool place makes those days a little bit easier to deal with. Whereas if you're in also a terrible place and you're having a terrible day,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
doesn't help.
Yeah. There's this line, another line like I read that you wrote, and you said, "It is an inefficient use of energy. It is an inefficient use of energy to try and convince non-black people to prioritize black people in any area." And I didn't really have a question for that. I just wanted you to say more about that because I thought it was a heavy, heavy
uh,
sentence.
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of self-explanatory, but there's another quote, something like, you end up wasting a lot of energy trying to convince people of things that you thought were obvious. And I can't remember is it Toni Morris? I can't remember who said that,
Mm,
but because I used to get caught up in a bunch of debates and they don't move the conversation forward and don't result in action. And that's, we're way too far behind. We got a $15 trillion wealth gap. We don't have time to be arguing with people about stuff that should be obvious. Like, because I was just thinking about this in the context of reparations. I, I'm doing a lot of work on reparations, but all of my work is focused on one, how to get it, and then how to implement a reparations program. I'm doing no work on proving that we should get it. Like all that works, one, it's already been done by
mm,
people
mm.
much more qualified than me, like Ta-Nehisi Coates, Sandy William Darity wrote a really good, I think the pivotal work called From Here to Equality. So if From Here to Equality doesn't convince you that reparations is needed, and you know, and the amount of the amount that we should get, I'm not going to do that. But for the people who do agree, both philosophically and practically, that it's a necessary fight, I'm focused on that, and my energy is better used on moving the ball forward rather than arguing where to put the ball,
Yeah. Like
or
that.
whether the ball even exists. 'Cause some people don't even acknowledge the existence of the problem. I don't have any words for those people.
Yeah. Um, how might AI, impact Black economic self-determination in your view?
And that's a good question. I've been thinking a lot about AI and specifically automation in the context of post-labor economics, because I think sooner than most people think, we're going to get to a point where most human labor is unnecessary. And how do we position ourselves to deal with that? Because if we stay on the path that we're on, it's going to create more inequality. It's only going to widen gaps. And um, if we don't have control the means of production in that context. So how AI can affect the Black community specifically is one, increasing our productivity, right? Like this is a great equalizer. For example, like I'm a non-technical founder. I don't know how to code, but I've started to do some coding because AI enabled that. And I've always been the idea guy and the product guy, so I'm really good at user experience and user interface. But um, I'm non-technical, so I can't code. Now I can. So now literally I can start and run an entire company myself, which is my dream because like I said, I'm an introvert, and dealing with employees is the worst part of growing a startup. Um, so you can literally have $100 million, $1 billion businesses with very few employees, which is both a good and a bad thing. Like your revenue per employee is going to be through the roof. It's going to be amazing wealth generation opportunity, but it's also going to displace a bunch of jobs. So we need to put ourselves in a position to, one, not only take advantage of these productivity tools as individuals, increasing our productivity, increasing our earning potential, but also collectively um, creating systems where the wealth and the gains from that productivity increase are actually distributed. So one very specific way to do that is focusing more on employee and community-owned cooperatives and employee-owned businesses, which one are studies have shown are actually more profitable and more resilient, because you know for example, a factory that is owned by its employees is not going to outsource its jobs to China, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's going to be more resilient source of jobs for that community, but also employees who are owners have more of incentive to save the company money or increase the company's efficiency, um, and that proves out over time that employee-owned businesses are more productive. So marrying the increased productivity gains from AI and automation with an employee and community ownership structure, like you've got Seven Anda in Atlanta, which is a community-owned grocery store. Like marrying those two things, I think not only can one actually make us economically relevant, but also make sure that the gains from that increased productivity get distributed more equitably than they otherwise would.
Yeah.
But just for startup founders, like if you're not using AI on a day-to-day basis and forcing your employees to, you're already falling behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like these tools are wild, and they're only getting more powerful.
That's right.
10 years from now, I can't even predict what the world's going to look
Yeah.
like. It's going to be insane if we don't destroy ourselves first, or just destroy the planet.
Yeah, so I have this, personal philosophy about, some Black institutions. So I'll give you one example, or maybe two examples. So like, I believe there's no reason the Black church shouldn't be into farming and banking. Like we need to be collecting. Like what are we doing
Oh yeah,
if we're not
you
growing
speaking my
food?
language now, but don't get me started.
Like what are we doing if we're not teaching people how to grow food and we're not helping them
Yep,
in economics? And if we
yep,
just shouting on Sunday, we're not doing much. And so
right.
I'd like you to speak more on the role traditional black institutions should be playing in economic development.
Yeah, I, I'm definitely very critical of existing institutions as well. Um, but we can't just burn them to the ground. Like they have, institutional infrastructure that is valuable, and that has been developed over decades, and it'd be a shame for that to go to waste. But um, so one very simple thing that I've been proposing for years now is that every black institution should have some mechanism to economically organize their membership base. So it doesn't matter what the purpose of the organization is, you should have some type of mutual aid, uh, investment club, SUSU, rotating loans, something that connects the membership economically and allows them to invest in each other, beyond just simply like supporting each other's businesses if they exist at all. So that's one like very easy low hanging fruit, and churches are a, an easy way to organize that because they're already meeting every week, right? You could include an investment club meeting right after Bible study. So the infrastructure already exists. They already have a mechanism to collect money from everybody, all the members. So that's one. And then, from churches in particular, because I'll get to professional organizations as well, but churches in particular, most of them are sitting on some of the most valuable real estate in the country, right? And most of it's being underutilized 6 or 5 days out of the week. So increasing the utilization of the physical spaces, like it doesn't make any sense to me that there are any homeless or hungry people within, a half a mile radius of any church. So getting into that, urban farming and maybe creating some halfway houses or some type of living facilities next to or in the church, using the church me- physical spaces for community events and meetings that otherwise we have to pay for. For example, like we host demo days and we always pay the venue for that. Might as well like that. But using the physical spaces and organizing the membership economically, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not enough to just have social gatherings and pray for each other, but actually investing in each other and investing in the communities. Uh, Same goes for like HBCUs and alumni networks. It doesn't make sense why all these HBCUs are physically located in impoverished neighborhoods. Like the HBCU should be a center of economic activity that expands out from it, enabled by alumni networks who are also organized in investment clubs and things like that. So you have the alumni, all the AUC alumni should be partial owners of all the businesses that operate within, a 5 mile radius of the AUC in Atlanta,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, Same goes for professional organizations like, like NAACP, NSB. Well, NAACP is a civic organization. So like NSB, National Black MBA Association, all the Divine Nine, NPHC organizations, similar thing. I know the Omegas have a credit union. Like every institution should have at least a credit union. That's low hanging fruit. An investment club organized locally, regionally, and nationally for all the organizations, and an official investment mechanism, right? Because all these nonprofits are sitting on piles of cash. And most of them have not organized them into endowments, right? Like that's how Ivy League universities can offer free tuition for undergrads now because their endowments are so big. We need to be focusing on growing permanent pools of capital that kick off regular returns, right? So then our organizations can then be self-funding rather than having
Yeah.
to go, live hand to mouth and go out and fundraise every year, and then those funds typically come along with strings attached, so which affects your political stances, the people that you can endorse, the policies that you support because of the source of the money. So if we have permanently endowed all these institutions, then we can be a little bit more have a little bit more sovereignty in terms of how we operate and how we move, and maybe we upset some folks, but it doesn't matter because they don't pay us, right?
There you go.
So um, these these legacy organizations have one thing that we desperately need, which is they've already organized the community. Like that's the
Hmm.
hardest part.
Hmm.
That's like my biggest bottleneck is I have a loose following, but I haven't created a structure around it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas these entities, and I don't feel like I need to do that. Like I don't think the world needs another Black organization. Like we already have plenty that are underutilized. So I'd rather support the, you know, transformation of existing institutions and making them more effective than starting my own. Although I am reaching the limits of my patience, so I might end up starting something just because like I've been trying to work with existing people and it's frustrating for
Yeah.
somebody who's as impatient as I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, we could do this. Oh, I wanted to do all the time. Tré Baker, it was so good to talk to you. We'll have to do this again. Talk more about this Black institution thing because I think there's a whole lot to say there.